That's why when President Marcos Jr., for the first time in Philippine history, said that the Philippine territory is regulated by the Treaty of Paris as that was amplified, clarified, and amended by the Treaty of Washington.
Yeah.
So, nabuo na for the first time.
Yeah.
This clarifies to the whole world, and that is factually, legally, and historically correct. That is our narrative. That is the correct story of the
So,
Philippines.
Justice, then it begs the question, why was it included? Why was it mentioned in the speech by the President?
Because when
at the Shangri-La
after
Lounge?
signing the Treaty of Paris, so the Americans came here, and the Spanish garrisons in Cagayan de Sulu, Cebuto, Maupun Island, refused to vacate. They said, if you look at the Treaty of Paris lines, we are outside the Treaty of Paris lines because there was a mistake. In the Treaty of Paris, there were fixed coordinates, longitude, latitude of all the lines. So they drew the lines, and there were certain islands like in Cagayan de Sulu and Cebuto outside the line. So the Spanish garrison there refused to move. So they said, we are outside the treaty lines. So the Americans went back to the Spaniards, said, look, our intention was the entire Philippine archipelago should be ceded to the U.S. So let's clarify, sign a treaty again to clarify.
Washington.
The Spaniards refused. The Americans, after a long, acrimonious exchange of notes verbal, finally the Americans said, okay, to cut this short, we will pay you an additional $50,000 on top of the $20 million that we paid for the islands within the treaty lines.
To move the line.
The Spaniards said, that's too little. So the Americans doubled it to 100,000, and the Spaniards said, agree, we will sign.
Okay.
So the second treaty was signed 2 years later. 1898 Treaty of Paris, 1900 Treaty of Washington.
Yeah.
There's only one article in the Treaty of Washington. Spain also cedes to the U.S. any and all islands
outside
belonging to the Philippine archipelago lying outside the lines of the Treaty of Paris. So it included all islands of the Philippine archipelago outside the lines. So the question is, what are the islands of the Philippine archipelago outside the lines? Where is that document? Where is that map? We go to 3 maps. 1734 Murillo Velarde map, because it says that Panacot, that's Scarborough. It says that Los Baos de Paragua, those are the Spanish. The second, and that's an official map of Philippine territory as of 1734 because of the, you see there in the cartouche on the upper right-hand side, the
Justice, that's the map behind you, di ba?
Yeah, that's it.
That's the map behind you.
Yeah. You will see here, the cartouche, that's the Royal Crown of Spain. That means it's an official map. Okay.
Yun, that's the map behind them.
That's the map.
the Velarde map.
Yes.
Yeah,
So-
the Murillo Velarde map. The second map is the 1808. The 1808 is also an official Spanish, the second official Spanish map of Philippine territory during the Spanish regime. And it's more precise now because Scarborough Shoal is there with depth soundings. Because Alessandro Malaspina came here to Manila in 1792 and went straight to Scarborough to conduct a depth sounding.
Yes.
Mineasure niya yung depth of all the rocks, so to guide navigators. And that's why there is that in 1808 map, you see the depth soundings there, the survey of Malaspina. And then the last map of Philippine territory during the Spanish regime, the 1875 Carta General del Archipelago Filipino. And when the Americans came here, they did not have a map of the Philippines. They adopted in toto the 1875 Carta General of the Spaniards because it was the most complete map. You can see Scarborough Shoal there, and you can see the entire Spratlys. You can see Tito. Tito Island is there. Tito Island is Pagasa. You can see Ituaba. Ituaba is there. Everything, and with depth soundings.
So
With depth measurements of the depth around the islands to guide navigators. So this is really the complete map of Philippine territory. When you ask the question, what are the islands of the Philippine archipelago outside the lines of the Treaty of Paris? This is the map. Okay?
So-
And in the Islas Palmas case, That's the famous case between the Netherlands and the U.S. over the island of Palmas off the coast of Mindanao in the Philippine Sea, because the Spaniards discovered the island and put it in the 1875 map. But the Spaniards never returned to the island. It was the Dutch East India Company that went there and signed a treaty with the locals. There were about 700 people living there. So the Dato, the local chieftain, pledged allegiance to the Netherlands. And so two countries claim now the Islas Palmas, and they submitted it to arbitration by Max Huber, a very famous case. This is a very famous international law case. And Max Huber said, discovery alone is not sufficient. You have to continuously display peaceful sovereignty over the territory to complete your title. And it was the Dutch that did that. So Max Huber awarded Islas Palmas to the Dutch, and it's now part of Indonesia.
Yeah.
But in that case, the Americans, to prove that Islas Palmas is part of the Philippines, submitted the 1875 map. 1875 map. And in their memorandum submitted to the judge, to Max Huber, they said, this 1875 map is an official map of Philippine territory during the Spanish regime and now during the American regime. So there you are. That's why this map is very important, because the Americans and the Spaniards said this is the map of Philippine territory. That was the subject of the Treaty of Washington.
Okay.
And the Treaty of Washington, there's a phrase there, and this cession of these islands outside the treaty lines retroact in cession, in ownership, up to the date of the Treaty of Paris. So when you look at the Treaty of Paris, you have to think that there are islands outside also. Because the Treaty of Washington said that this cession in 1900 of the islands outside the treaty lines are deemed incorporated into the Treaty of Paris.
Yeah.
Okay, Ron?
So that's why,
Justice,
but of course, that's not the narrative that our
Yes.
legal luminaries have been saying all along.
Yeah.
And the Chinese have
Use that. Abuse that.
followed our legal luminaries that
Yeah.
the Philippine territory is limited to the islands within the treaty lines. That's why when President Marcos Jr., for the first time in Philippine history, said that the Philippine territory is regulated by the Treaty of Paris as that was amplified, clarified, and amended by the Treaty of Washington.
Yeah.
So nabuo na for the first time.
Yeah.
This clarifies to the whole world, and that is factually, legally, and historically correct. That is our narrative. That is the correct story of the Philippines.
So, Justice, you would say that that very important detail was probably the biggest thing that to come out of the president's speech in Shangri-La Dialogue.
Yes,
In
in my
relation-
view,
in relation,
that was
Justice, sa
the
tanong ni
watershed
Patrick,
moment where he clarified Philippine territory. That's directly directed at China.
Yeah. So
Should we
Justice,
still
in relation
amplify
dun
it,
sa
Justice?
in relation
The
sa
funny
tanong ni
thing is
Patrick,
this.
the
In the
president,
arbitration at The Hague,
yeah.
China said, we are not participating, but this is our position. Philippine territory is regulated by 3 treaties, as stated in the 1935 Philippine Constitution. Treaty of Paris, Treaty of Washington, and the treaty with the British demarcating our
Yes.
boundary in southern Philippines, between southern Philippines and British North Borneo. They mentioned the Treaty of Washington. So they're bound by the Treaty of Washington. They said Philippine territory is also regulated by the Treaty of Washington, but they didn't read the text of the Treaty of Washington. So they said Philippine territory is regulated by 3 treaties, Treaty of Paris, Treaty of Washington, and Treaty with the British, and all these islands can only be found within the treaty lines.
Yeah.
They misread or did not read. They were misled by our legal luminaries. And that position paper under the law, that is a judicial admission, the highest form of admission. So they admit that our territory is regulated also by the Treaty of Washington, and that binds them.